There is a weight in silence that many do not understand until they have lived through the ache of misunderstanding, until they have stood in the presence of someone who demands an answer they have no right to. You see, silence is not always passive. Sometimes it is the heaviest thing in the room. It speaks when words would only tangle the truth. It holds the power to say, "I'm done explaining who I am to someone committed to misunderstanding me." Some will see your silence and call it weakness. They will interpret your distance as guilt, your lack of response as evidence of something to hide. But hear this, silence is not weakness. It is restraint. It is choosing peace over performance. It is a refusal to offer your soul as a spectacle for someone else's scrutiny. Because there comes a time when explanations become like shouting into the wind, loud, desperate, and utterly useless. And when that time comes, it takes more strength to stay silent than it does to speak. There are people in your life who will not hear you no matter how carefully you choose your words. They are not listening to understand. They are listening to respond, to defend, to accuse, to diminish. And every time you try to explain yourself, you're offering a piece of your heart to someone who has already decided to trample it. That's when silence becomes sacred. It is not silence out of fear, but silence rooted in wisdom. We are taught to believe that communication is always the key, that if we just say the right thing, people will finally see our side. But what happens when the other person has no intention of seeing? What happens when your honesty becomes their ammunition? That is where the weight of silence enters. It is heavy because it costs you the need to be understood. It costs you the comfort of being right. It costs you the pride that wants to defend itself, but in return, it gives you peace, it gives you freedom, and yes, it's lonely sometimes. There will be moments where you will want to speak, where your heart burns with things left unsaid. But silence, when chosen wisely, is not a void, it is a boundary, it is a line drawn in spiritual maturity that says, "I will not let this drain me anymore." You don't have to fight every battle, you don't have to answer every question. You don't have to justify your growth to people who are allergic to change. Your silence can be a wall that protects what is sacred in you. It can be a holy hush that speaks more than 1,000 well-crafted arguments. So when the moment comes, and it will, when you must decide whether to speak or to be still, don't be afraid of the weight of silence. Embrace it. Let it say what words cannot. Let it be your strength when noise only brings confusion. Let it carry the weight your words were never meant to hold. Peace is one of those things you don't know the true value of until it's been stolen from you, until your mind is racing at night, your heart is worn thin from trying to keep everyone happy, and your spirit is stretched by the constant noise of people who have no business being that close to your soul. There is a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from work or responsibility. It comes from being too available to people who drain you. And when you finally get a taste of real peace, you start to understand it's not just a feeling, it's a necessity. There is no apology needed for protecting the peace God has given you. That peace didn't come cheap. It came through pain. It came through lessons. It came through walking away from things that once defined you. So when you find it, you guard it. You don't explain it. You don't feel guilty for it. You treat it like treasure because it is. Some people will guilt you for choosing peace over chaos. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're being selfish. But hear me, selfishness is holding on to what hurts because you're afraid to let it go. Wisdom is knowing when to step away, not to prove a point, but to preserve what's left of your heart. You don't have to burn out just to prove you care. You don't have to stay in the middle of someone else's storm just to look loyal. Sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is leave. Peace is not passive. It is not laziness. It's not indifference. It is courage. It is saying, I refuse to live at war with myself just to keep peace with others. You can love people and still create space. You can forgive people and still never let them that close again. Peace doesn't mean pretending everything's fine. It means you've decided that your well-being is no longer up for negotiation. You begin to realize that your peace is tied to your purpose. You cannot hear clearly when your soul is cluttered with drama, with noise, with people who talk but never listen. And there's a quiet strength that comes over you when you finally understand that not everyone deserves a seat at the table of your inner life. That's not pride, it's protection. That's not hate, it's healing. Sometimes God will separate you to restore you. He will pull you out of the chaos to show you what stillness feels like. And in that stillness, you see things more clearly. You see who was real, who was using you, who was only loyal to your struggle, not your growth. And once you taste that kind of clarity, you will stop settling for anything that threatens it. Peace isn't the absence of people, it's the absence of turmoil. And once you've fought to find it, you'll never let it be taken lightly again. Peace is sacred, peace is powerful, and peace is worth every distance it requires. There's a certain kind of weariness that creeps in when you keep trying to explain yourself to people who have already made up their minds about you. No matter how carefully you speak, how honest you are, how raw your truth may be, they don't hear you. Not because your words lack weight, but because their ears are closed, their hearts are hard, and their minds are already set. And what's worse is that they don't want to understand. They just want something to fight, something to blame, or something to twist into their own narrative. You could pour your soul out in front of them, and they'd still look at you and say, "That's not good enough." Why? Because they weren't looking for truth, they were looking for ammunition. And once you understand that, truly understand it, you start to realize how much energy you've wasted trying to prove yourself to people who never deserved access in the first place. It's not your job to convince the unwilling. It's not your calling to open the eyes of those who refuse to see. There is a difference between someone who doesn't understand and someone who chooses not to. And when a person has decided that you are a villain in their story, no amount of truth will make them see you differently. That's not your fault, that's their blindness, and it's not your burden to carry. You see, explanation is sacred. It's something you give to the willing, to the humble, to the ones who approach you with open hands, not clenched fists. But when you keep explaining yourself to the unwilling, you're not standing in grace, you're standing in desperation. And desperation has a way of making you shrink, of making you beg for clarity from people who thrive on your confusion. Some will take your explanations and twist them. Others will act like they didn't hear you at all. And some will use your honesty against you, weaponizing your vulnerability just to maintain their illusion of control. So you learn, often through pain, that silence is sometimes your only shield, that no answer is the best answer when the heart asking the question is filled with pride, not humility. It's not bitterness. It's not arrogance, it's wisdom, it's discernment. You were never meant to carry the weight of other people's unwillingness. You were never meant to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially when they never planned to build a fire of their own. You can speak the truth with love and still be ignored. That doesn't mean you failed. That means it's time to let go. Sometimes the greatest act of faith is walking away without giving an explanation. Trusting that God sees what they refuse to see, trusting that your value isn't measured by their ability to understand you, and resting in the truth that you are not responsible for opening eyes that refuse to look. Discernment isn't just about knowing the difference between right and wrong. It's about knowing the difference between what is good and what looks good. It's about recognizing that not every open door is a calling, and not every voice in your ear is sent by God. Some things come dressed in light but carry the weight of distraction, and if you don't have discernment, real, spirit-led discernment, you'll find yourself stuck in places you were never meant to stay, explaining yourself to people you were never meant to walk with. There is a power in discernment that most people don't talk about because it's not loud or flashy. It doesn't come with applause. It comes in the quiet, when you're paying attention, when you're praying more than you're posting, when you're listening more than you're reacting. Discernment sees through the mask. It hears the motive behind the words. It catches what your emotions missed, and that's where strength is born, not in how quickly you respond, but in how wisely you choose to. Sometimes discernment will lead you to walk away, not because you hate someone, but because you finally see what they've been doing to your spirit. You finally understand the pattern, the manipulation, the draining cycle that kept repeating because you were too busy being loyal to notice you were losing yourself. And that moment, when your eyes open and your heart gets quiet, that's the moment everything changes. That's the power of discernment. It doesn't just change your decisions, it changes your direction. People will call you cold for not engaging. They'll say you're distant, that you've shut down. But what they don't understand is that discernment teaches you when your voice is no longer needed. It teaches you that sometimes the best way to honor God is to be still, to step back, to stop casting your pearls before swine, because not every battle is yours to fight, not every conversation is worth your energy. Not every apology needs to be chased down. You'll meet people who seem right, say the right things, show up at the right time, but discernment will whisper something's off, and you won't always be able to explain it. That's the frustrating part, but discernment doesn't wait for proof. It moves when peace disappears. It listens to what the Spirit is saying, not what your flesh wants to hear, and the more you obey it, the sharper it becomes. Discernment keeps you from wasting years in places that never bore fruit. It saves you from partnerships that look promising but are rooted in pride. It calls you higher, not by elevating you above others, but by protecting the soil around your purpose. It tells you when to stay, when to go, when to speak, and when to be silent. And if you ignore it, you pay the price, not always in pain, but in delay, because without discernment, even good intentions can lead you into the wrong place. And with it, even hard decisions become holy. There comes a time when you feel it deep in your spirit, a pull, a stirring, a quiet nudge that tells you it's time to rise, not in pride, not in arrogance, but in purpose. It's not about walking away from people to feel superior. It's about walking toward what God is building in you. That's the calling to higher ground, and it doesn't always make sense to the people around you. Sometimes it doesn't even make sense to you, but it's real, it's holy, and it's heavy. Higher ground is lonely at first. It strips you, it humbles you, it asks you to let go of things that once made you feel safe. Relationships, habits, conversations, you start to see them for what they really are, not because you suddenly became better, but because you became more awake, your eyes open, and what once entertained you now disturbs you. What once felt normal now feels heavy. That's the sign, that's the call. You're being asked to rise, and rising means separation. You can't take everyone with you. That's the hard truth. Some people are tied to the version of you that you're trying to leave behind. And when you start to grow, they'll pull on your old self, trying to drag you back into old patterns, old jokes, old cycles. Not because they're evil. Sometimes they love you, but they love the you that no longer exists. And if you're not careful, you'll shrink just to stay familiar. You'll silence your growth just to remain accepted. But higher ground is not about comfort. It's about obedience. It's about saying, Lord, I'm willing to walk alone if that's what it takes to walk with you. And when you make that decision, everything changes. You stop begging people to understand your silence. You stop feeling guilty for creating distance, because you realize the distance wasn't punishment. It was preparation. God was pruning you, not to punish your past, but to prepare your future. People will say you've changed. Let them. That's what growth does. It changes things. It changes priorities. It changes language. It changes how you spend your time, who you open your heart to, and what you no longer tolerate. It doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. And clarity is what you need on higher ground, because up there, the air is thin. There's no room for unnecessary weight, no space for shallow roots. You'll miss some people. That's part of the process. You'll want to explain yourself, but eventually you learn that not every goodbye needs a speech. Some doors close quietly, and that's okay, because you're not climbing to impress anyone. You're not rising to prove a point. You're answering a call, and when God calls you higher, He doesn't send a crowd. He sends clarity, He sends conviction, He sends peace that doesn't make sense, and a fire that won't go out.